C for the O'Galley Scenic Railroad. Today I'm going to show you a little bit on what I'm doing to rebuild an engine that's eventually going to go in the Plymouth locomotive that we're rebuilding. Now I sent this block in to get checked. There's nothing wrong with it. They've checked it for cracks and all that sort of stuff, and it's in good shape. And the bearings are all good, so I'm just going to put it back together. One of the things I want to show you on the front of this as I put it back together is one of the things you got to be careful of is the timing marks here. There's a little dimple on this little gear, and there's a dimple on this big gear. And this big gear controls the camshaft. This little one obviously goes to the crankshaft. And if you don't have those two spaced right, then the valves on the top of the engine don't operate correctly, and you could have a piston coming up at the same time a valve is opening, and you'd end up breaking something and the engine won't run. So whenever you're rebuilding an engine like this, you always want to make sure your camshaft timing marks line up with the crankshaft. Now I got this all put back together. I put the crankshaft in, and I put the main bearings back in, and I've torqued them down. I've got a torque chart that I used, and I've torqued them all down to the proper settings. The other thing I did as I was putting everything back together, I made up this little mixture of oil, and I painted everything with oil before I put it back together, so when we go to start the engine, it's not running in a dry environment. See, there's your timing marks that need to line up right there. And as you can see, the timing marks turn at 1/2 the speed. The camshaft turns at 1/2 the speed of the engine. So for every round that the engine timing mark makes, the camshaft timing mark makes half as much, makes half the distance. And the reason for that is so that the valves open and close in the proper sequence in relation to the piston's position, because this is a 4-cycle engine. Now, coming around here to the back of the engine, the next thing I'm going to do is put the clutch on. And this big component here, for those of you that are not engine inclined, is the flywheel, and that provides inertia to keep the engine running when it's running. And this is the clutch plate. This provides the friction, so when you take your foot off the clutch on a car, this is what makes the transmission turn and you get down the road. And it's a real simple process. You've got a thin side on one side and a fairly thick side on the other. And the thick side goes against this pressure plate. And this pressure plate is machined to a real smooth surface. And the flywheel here is machined to a real smooth surface to accommodate the clutch plate. So when you're putting them together, you put the flat side against the flywheel and you flop it on there. And in a situation like this, I like to take one of the bolts and just start it in the flywheel like this. Just to hold it in place. And then I take the clutch plate and slide the clutch plate into position. Now when I was growing up and doing this on automobiles, you'd always put the clutch plate in there and hope that you got it about right. And 9 times out of 10, you were always off by a little bit, so it was always a fight when you were going to put the transmission in to get everything to tighten up like it should, or line up right so it'd go back together. But since I've got this engine all apart, one of the things that I've got to make the job go easier is this is the front of the transmission. And it's got this spline shaft that matches up with the spline shaft on the clutch plate. And so you just line that up, poke it in there, and then I can raise it up to where it's in position. And then I line it up with the pilot bearing, which as you can see, sometimes can be a chore in itself. There we go. I put a little chalk mark in there so I knew that when I put this all together how far it had to go in. So now you just take the rest of your bolts and put it all together. And then I've got to find the torque specs for these bolts. I couldn't find it in the chart I was provided, so I'm going to have to go get another chart. But I've got my torque wrench here to be able to torque it down to the correct specifications. Anytime you're working with an engine like this, you always want to torque things to the proper spec so that they stay together and the bolts don't get loose and fall out.
So I'm here at the shop in the railroad, and every once in a while we get to do some little fun projects that aren't super critical, and today I'm working on one of those projects. I'm making milepost signs for the railroad. So we thought that it would be kind of appropriate and probably useful to be able to divide up what little mileage we have on the railroad into some increments that made sense, so we would have some reference markers like the real railroads do along the road. So every 1/10 of a mile we'll have a milepost sign. And so right now I'm just slowly kind of starting this project, and I'm painting these. We've got some stencils here. This one's already been prepared. I'm going to paint it, and then we'll take the stencil off and see if I can mess it up. So let's try that. Go too heavy. Take our masking off here. And then we'll reveal our stencil. And we'll get down here where we can see. I'm going to get my glasses. And we'll start peeling this back. Nice and easy, starting at the corner. We've used stencils from this company called Craft Cuts, and they're really good stencils. I really like them. We used them on the locomotives, we used them on the cars, any of the signs that we've made in the past. And once you get used to how they behave, they work really, really well. We're just going to start peeling this up just a little at a time. I'm going to walk it around the corner and get it up where I can join my fingers together, and then we'll come down here and pull this. All the way around. Pull it around this way. Okay, so that's the outside. This is milepost 0.2. Or as the railroad would say, 0.2. So now we're going to get our razor blade in here and try to lift up this corner, which is always fun. So we've got that lifted. And voila! Stencil. And now we're gonna put it. We'll get our drill in here. Take that out. It's holding our sign down. This is about 1/8 inch thick steel plate that we made this out of. So they should last forever. And there it is. So the signpost will be on this side. It's a two-sided sign. You can read it from either direction on the track. And you'll always know where you are on the railroad.
Here goes the stampede.
So in the last video, we introduced the idea of bringing in goats to help clear some of the underbrush around the railroad and other parts of our property that are kind of choked with buckthorn and other undergrowth. And so today, the wonderful goat herd has finally arrived, and immediately upon coming out of the trailer, they went to work right away like good little troopers. And we're going to see just how much they can accomplish in a week or two.
Goats, we have the ones with ears and the ones without ears. The ones with ears are a beat goat called a Kiko. They originate from New Zealand, and they are bred to pretty much do everything on their own. They breed on their own, they feed on their own. In New Zealand, they just take them out when they sell them to market. They come off the hills. The La Manchas are a dairy goat. It's actually the only American dairy goat. It was developed in the western part of the United States, and they do have ears, but they don't have any floppy, so it's like these little nubs. And the nubs were developed so that they wouldn't get frostbite in the winter. So here in Wisconsin, it's perfect because when it gets cold, they've got these wattles. They're like little skin tags that are on their neck. They just tuck their chins in and they stay nice and warm. Whereas the eared goats have to like wrap their heads around, and with those horns it's a little difficult to do. There is a goat in here who got frostbite when she was a baby, and you can see why you'd want those small ears. Both breeds are highly intelligent, and they like to eat brush. One of the catches with doing any type of buckthorn removal is a goat will only eat what it's taught to eat by its mom. And so if the goat that you have hasn't ever been exposed to buckthorn or any type of brush, you're going to get a goat that's going to stand at the fence line and ask for grain. But these guys have been out with their moms and their mothers before them, all munching away. Beautiful.
So this section of track in the front of our loop on the west side was recently completed with top ballast. We had added some last fall, and now we're finishing it. And now we're also going to be going up on the hill to do more. So we've gone from laying track on our Volunteer Tuesdays to laying top ballast and trying to finish off some of these stretches that we can't get to. We just finished this part this week down near the horseshoe, and it turned out really nice. So if you like our videos, please subscribe, hit the like button, and don't forget to leave a comment.